Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, Savage Reads, and before I jump into my normal book wrap-up, a quick embroidery update. My embroidery has been going a little bit slower. I have not been working on it as much. I've had a lot going on, and so things have moved a little slower this week, but I have worked on it. So where I've got to at this point is here. It looks like something, I suppose. We still kind of have the bird shape going on. I'm thinking I might use some paint, some fabric paint for some of the inside. We'll see. We'll see. I'm trying to get some different textures in here and kind of show the different parts. And I really hope that I'm getting all the key parts stitched correctly. And I'm just going to keep going with it and adding in some fun colors, and we will see what happens with that. But with that update out of the way, I will just jump into the books that I've read. So the first book that I want to talk about is called Why Fathers Cry at Night, a memoir in love poems, letters, recipes, and remembrances by Kwame Alexander. And this book is exactly what it says on the tin, and it has a lot of different beautiful writing pulled together that is very reflective and is talking about his experiences growing up, how he saw love in his parents' relationships, and how that has translated into his current family relationships, and how he wants to grow and change. And it's so lovely at times. I think this book was obviously something very heartfelt and meaningful to the author. You could really see that he put his heart and soul into this book. Now, does that translate to being super significant for me specifically as a person? No, not really, but I still appreciated it for what it was, and I'm glad that he had the space and ability to work through these complicated emotions. And I think him setting that example as a man that can really work through these difficult emotions was lovely. I think there were a lot of good things about it and parts of it that maybe resonated a little more, but am I gonna remember it super well? No, not necessarily, but I still really did think it was well done. The only other book that I have read by this author was Solo, and it was also written with Mary Rand Hess, and I do not remember a thing about it, but I did read it all the way back in 2017. So I don't have a lot to compare with this author, and I do wonder if knowing more of his other work and his fiction work would help me maybe appreciate his life story a little more. And so I don't know if this is the place you should start with this author, because I did feel like some of his experiences I was a little bit disconnected from, but I still did appreciate the beautiful insights and the gorgeous writing. So I forgot to mention that last book was a recommendation from Caitlin at Bandy's Books, and so is the next one. So I read The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane by Lisa C. And this book is following the life of a girl who is an ethnic minority in China. This is following the story of a young girl who's part of a tea collecting community, and they have very strong traditions, and we get to see her life over 20-30 years. And it talks about how things change for their community as more modern technology becomes introduced. And it deals with some very interesting topics about cross-cultural adoptions. It talks about traditional values, the values of tea. It talks about community building and respecting nature. There are a lot of really interesting themes in this book, and you definitely root for that main character a lot. Where this trips me up is the same feeling I have in a lot of historical fiction, where I appreciate that the book has introduced me to a time and place that I was not familiar. And I appreciate that it is addressing very important issues. But what trips me up in so much historical fiction is that most of the time I spend time in the book thinking, I wish I was reading a true story about this time and place, because I think there are some really important stories about searching for your roots and about cross-cultural adoption and about growing up in an ethnic minority in China would be super interesting, and I want to know what actually happened. And parts of this girl's life just felt so overly dramatized, and I don't love that. It's why I struggle with historical fiction as a genre. Doesn't mean that there aren't historical fiction books that I love. I love some historical fiction books. They are done so well and done in a way that sheds light on such interesting topics and places. And there's also some that are written so well and are written as an amazing novel with these themes that come together through these literary devices. I appreciate all of that. But a lot of times I feel like an author picks an interesting time and place, and to get people interested in what was going on, they take a story and just dramatize it, make the most over the top things that could happen all happen to one person. And I think there was a bit of that, and it just wasn't my favorite for that reason. Did I still think this book was worth a read? Yeah, I'm glad I picked it up. I think I learned a lot. I thought the story was really compelling. I needed to know what happened because all these dramatic things were happening and I needed to get through the book. I really would just be more interested in some real stories that took place in the time and setting. But if you like historical fiction and you just think it's a great genre, this is gonna be your book. If you ever have reservations on historical fiction and you prefer maybe a nonfiction account, I don't know if this is a good crossover for you. I read Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix. I have read a few Grady Hendrix now, so this is exactly what you would expect from a Grady Hendrix book, that over-the-top horror trope kind of book, but done in a really engaging and fun sort of way. I really had a great time with this. This is following the haunting of basically an IKEA, a knockoff IKEA, and the workers that are staying overnight there to see what is going on. And rarely do I read a horror book and think, I wish I could just watch this. Like, I think this would translate well to the screen, because usually I think, oh, I am so glad I'm reading this because I don't want to see all the gore. I just want to read it and enjoy it and not have to picture all the details. But for some reason, the way that this book was set up, it just seems like something that would work really well visually. I want the movie. So that was kind of fun. I loved all the IKEA kind of tie-ins, all these furniture things. I thought it was really fun, and maybe you can draw some parallels between the horror of working in retail and the horror of an actual horror situation. I think you get a lot of fun and you get creepy, and Grady Hendrix knows that perfect blend of not taking yourself too seriously, but still giving you a good, solid product. And I think that this was great. It did trip me up a little towards the end. Is there a sequel? I don't know. I think some of the other Grady Hendrix books that I have read have been more satisfying, and I think How to Sell a Haunted House that I read last year was probably my favorite Grady Hendrix that I have read so far, because it came together exactly how I thought it should. And so I am not too sold as this being my favorite Grady Hendrix book, but if you like that type of book, I had a great time. It was very fun. Oh, and I forgot to mention that that was a recommendation from Melinda at A Web of Stories, so I will make sure to link her channel down below. And this last book, once again, is a recommendation from Caitlin at Bandy's Books. This is your week, Caitlin. I jumped on the bandwagon of reading I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman, and so many people have reviewed this book, and I wasn't really sure what I was getting into. I had heard the reviews, I had heard really great things, and this book is a little hard to describe. I'm just going to read the description. It's deep underground, 39 women live imprisoned in a cage, watched over by guards. The women have no memory of how they got there, no notion of time, and only a vague recollection of their lives before. And we have a young girl, the 40th prisoner, and she helps everyone survive and escape in the strange world that awaits them above ground. The main key question in this book that keeps you reading is what is going on. Why are these women in this cage? Who put them there? What are they going to do next? What happened in their lives? And that is kind of the driving force through this. There were some really interesting discussions on humanity and on womanhood and on what makes us a civilization, what gives us meaning in our lives, what helps us progress and learn. I thought it was really interesting from a study and meditate on these ideas kind of book. I think the description is just right, where it says, it's an important addition to the growing canon of feminist speculative literature. I think you need to approach this book as a work of feminist speculative literature, because that's really what it is. If you are looking for a sci-fi book that has a lot of action, or if you're looking for a cool mystery, you're going to be kind of disappointed. But it was an interesting one. So while I can't say that I loved this book, I'm really glad I read it. It was very interesting. It definitely leaves you with a few things to think about and more questions than answers, but I'm glad I read it. Well, thank you for watching. If you have any thoughts on these books, please leave them in the comments down below, and I will see you all on the next one.